When on a journey, there are few things more frustrating than getting stuck. For example, being stuck in traffic. I know hate is a strong word, but I hate being stuck in traffic. I become one of those annoying, aggressive drivers in traffic, the one who is constantly switching lanes, thinking that it's going to allow him to get to his destination much faster. And it's no fun to have your car break down and have to pull over to the side of the road. You're stuck, right? And something that you guys probably deal with more often is having a flight delayed or canceled. I once had my connecting flight in Charlotte canceled because they didn't have enough flight attendants. One of them got sick, and I guess because of regulation, they can't fly without a certain amount of flight attendants. And anyway, I was stuck. And I was frustrated. Whatever it is, whatever it could be, to be stuck or delayed, somewhere in between your starting point and your destination can bring up a lot of frustration. You could even be frustrated and stuck and still be moving. For example, when my family and I moved out to the Bay Area about 8 years ago from Florida, my father-in-law and I, we drove the moving truck and we towed our SUV. And it took us 4 days to get here, and that was us having a plan to drive about 16 hours each day. But I can tell you the most brutal part of that trip was driving through Texas. And no offense to my Texas peeps, but it was horrible. You know, when you're on a journey, you want to hit these milestones, right? Just as a reminder to let you know that you are making progress, that you are getting somewhere. So coming out of Florida, and that took a little bit because we were coming from South Florida, so it took about 8 hours to get out of our state. But then you start to hit right Alabama, and it's a smaller state, and you get through it pretty quickly. And then Mississippi, you hit Mississippi, then you hit Louisiana, but then you come across Texas. And Texas is like an abyss. It feels like it just swallows you whole. I don't know how I remember this, but you know, when you're driving on the interstate, specifically on I-10, when you enter a new state, it gives you a mile marker. And basically that mile marker is telling you how long is it going to take for you to get out of the state. When we entered Texas, it said 880 miles. It's like, why is Texas so big? Share the wealth, divide that up into 3 states, and give me some more mile markers along the way. And to make matters worse, again, we were moving, but we felt stuck. It took us a day and a half to get out of Texas. My Texas people back there. To make matters worse, we got a flat in Texas. So it's the middle of August. It's 95 degrees. We're in the middle of nowhere, and it took us 4 hours to get back on the road. And 4 hours in the middle of 4 days may not seem like much, but that's valuable time that was wasted where we were stuck. And when you're in those situations, when you are delayed or stuck, you don't ever have to ask, are we there yet? You know, and you are well aware that you're not making any progress, you're not moving forward, you are stuck in your position, and you feel it. You are carrying the weight of the stress and frustration that comes with that situation. And maybe you guys handle those moments better than me, but I tend to be a mess. I'm grumpy, I'm irritable, and even though many of those situations are out of my control, but I just don't like to be delayed or inconvenienced. I want to get to where I need to get to when I plan to get there. Now, what I just described are circumstantial ways that we get stuck or delayed, right? Traffic, flat tire, flight delayed. Those are temporary or short-term delays that truly mean very little in the grand scheme of things. But something that is a bit more serious and impactful is when we feel stuck in life. When we feel stuck in life, do you ever feel stuck? The question, are you stuck right now? To be stuck is to know where you want to go, to have an idea of where you want to go in regards to your career, in regards to your relationships, your relationship status, your health, your physique. You know where you want to go, but you just can't seem to get there. You feel like there's this wall just blocking you from making any progress to get to your destination. And you just feel like you're just circling around the same mountain over and over and over again. So what do we do when we feel stuck in life? Here's another question, and I would say an even more important question. What do we do when we feel stuck spiritually? What do we do when we feel disconnected from God? What do we do when we're dealing with the same habits and sins that we were dealing with years ago? And we realize that our disconnectedness from God and our sins and habits are impacting our relationships in our life completely. What do we do? As we continue in this series, we need to address the question, what do we do when we have setbacks along our journey of life? And I want us to ask and answer, what causes those setbacks and how do we break free from them? You see, there are times in our lives that things take longer to resolve or to get through than they should. They take longer to resolve or to get through than they should. And I want you to know that that's not always a bad thing. For example, next week we will be talking about the importance of having patience and perseverance. We're going to look at the biblical and agricultural principle of sowing and reaping. We shouldn't expect growth and fruits to come overnight. It just doesn't work that way. However, what I'm talking about today is that there are times that God intends for something to take only a year, but we can easily stretch it into a decade. And I want us to avoid that kind of stuckness, that feeling of not being able to overcome or move forward. And so our passage for today is a short one. It's from the book of Deuteronomy. And we're going to look at how the Israelites took a relatively short journey and turned it into a prolonged wilderness wandering, okay? We're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 1. We're going to read verses 2 and 3. If you will, stand with me as we read God's word. I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation for this passage. I believe it just kind of highlights this idea that we're trying to get to today, even more so. All right, so verse 2 of chapter 1 of Deuteronomy, it says this: normally it takes only 11 days to travel from Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, going by way of Mount Seir. But 40 years after the Israelites left Egypt, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses addressed the people of Israel, telling them everything the Lord had commanded him to say. You may be seated. I pray that God's word will speak to us. All right, let's do the spoiler alert up front. Trivia quiz. How long were the people of Israel in the desert or the wilderness? 40 years. 40 years. Let me give you, before we dive into this, let me give you a little bit of the backstory of what's happening here. The people of Israel for 400 years were living in the land of Egypt. For the majority of that time, they were slaves. They came into Egypt with about 70 people. But at the time of the Exodus, they left 1 million plus strong. But again, they were slaves in Egypt. And God had made promises to their ancestors that he would deliver them out of Egypt into their own land. He had made promises to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob that he would one day lift them up out of Egypt and bring them to the land that he had promised them, a land he describes as a land flowing with milk and honey, what we would term as the promised land. And so here we are. God has delivered the people in a miraculous way out of the grips of Pharaoh and the Egyptians. They are on their way to the promised land. And one of the first stops that they make is at Mount Sinai. Now, Mount Sinai in the story of Israel is significant. It is believed that they arrived at Mount Sinai about 45 days after the Exodus, okay? And at Mount Sinai, this is where God speaks to the people through Moses. This is where he makes a covenant with the people. This is where they receive the 10 Commandments. It's also believed this is where the tabernacle was built. So a lot of significant things happen at Mount Sinai. And then we're told that the people leave Mount Sinai about less than a year after the Exodus, okay? So they're there for a bit of time, but not more than a year. But here comes the bizarre part. The passage that we just read tells us that from the location of Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea is a journey of only about 11 days. 11 days, about 100 to 150 miles on foot. Here's why that's significant. Kadesh is the stop right before entering the Promised Land. If you will, if you're coming from the east, it's Oakland. Okay? Before crossing the bridge, it's Oakland. And at Kadesh, for those of you who know the story, that's where Moses sent out the 12 spies to go check out the land and to come back with a report. So they're right there. So you would think they left Mount Sinai, 11-day journey. They arrive at Kadesh. They arrive at their Oakland. You would think that not shortly after that, they're going in to possess the land. But no. The people of Israel found themselves unable to move forward for 40 years. 40 years. Talk about a delay. Talk about being stuck. An 11-day journey being extended out to 40 years. And so the question we have to ask, why? Why? What kept the people from moving forward? Was it their enemies? Was it the circumstances? Was it the trials that they faced along that journey? Or was it something completely different and something that was within their control that kept them from going in and possessing the land? Later today or tomorrow, homework, I want you to read through Deuteronomy chapter 1. Read the whole thing because it summarizes in an amazing way what kept the people from going in. But in essence, God had to intervene and stop the people from going. You see, it was God's plan the entire time for the people to go in and possess the land. It's what he had called them to do. It's what he had commanded them to do. He says, go and possess the land. But as I mentioned earlier, Moses sent out 12 spies to check out the land and to come back with a report. But the problem is that 10 out of those 12 spies came back with a negative report. And they came back saying that they say, hey, the land is amazing. They came back bringing fruit bigger than their heads. You know, like things like, hey, if we lived there, it would be awesome. But there's a problem. The people are humongous. They're huge. They are giants. And if we go and possess the land, they are going to squash us and kill us, and there will be no more of us. And what happened is that brought fear into the hearts of the people. And that fear led to disobedience. And they decided not to go in. And that disobedience led to God eventually saying, you're not going to possess the land. If you are older than a certain age, you are not going to be able to enter the land that I promised you because you did not trust in my word. You did not trust in me. You did not remember what I have already done for you, leaving Egypt. The moral of the story is that their journey could have taken 11 days had Israel been faithful and trusted God. Unbelief and disobedience robbed them of much blessing and effectiveness. The Israelites, their progress was suspended. It was halted. They remained in Kadesh for a long time in order to learn the lesson that God would have them learn, until another generation could raise up that would trust God and go in and possess the land. And so with this fresh perspective on what happened to the people of Israel, now I want to turn it back on us and ask, if we feel stuck, could it be that we have brought this on ourselves? That's a tough question. If we're being honest, many of us like to blame our lack of forward progress on others, or the circumstances that we find ourselves in, or the situations that have been handed to us. And sometimes that's true. There are certain situations that you are stuck and it's not your fault. Sometimes. But in the other situation, what if no one else is to blame but ourselves? Could it be that we are stuck because we haven't trusted in God to bring us to where He wants us to be? As difficult, guys, as difficult as those questions are, here's why they are important. Because it gets to the root of whether your current condition is in your control or out of your control. It gets to the root of, can I do something about this, or am I helpless? Am I a victim, or can I actually do something to get myself out of it? And that's a really tough question. Because when you are stuck, you feel like there's no way out. You know, today's Father's Day. And for the past couple of weeks, I've been feeling stuck. It's not a coincidence that I'm teaching this message, but I've been feeling stuck. And there's several factors that come into play with why I'm stuck, but I could only trace it back to mid-May. We're actually with Ben and Shauna, we're having lunch, and I get a call that my dad is in the hospital. It's not a new thing. It's not a call that I haven't received before. But my sister begins to tell me that Dad got an infection on his foot. He had his foot amputated last year. And he got an infection, and it knocked him out. And for 2 days, he didn't have his phone near him. He was inching his way, crawling to the door. So he was able to open the door and call out for his neighbor to hear him. And that was like a kick in the stomach. And I didn't feel stuck right away. You know, when you hear news like that, you don't know how to process. But over time, you begin to see things or feel things that you're like, this isn't the normal me. And when we are stuck, we respond one of two ways, just like the Israelites. There's a group of us that when we are stuck, that we just want to run away. We want to go back to the way things were. And the Israelites experienced that too. Being in the desert for 40 years, eating the same food. They're like, we should have stayed in Egypt. We had fish over there. Here, all we eat is bread and quail. Like, this is not a good dietary plan for us. But what they forgot was that they were slaves in Egypt. And quite honestly, for me, when I'm stuck, I want to run away. I want to run away from the responsibilities that I have. I want to go back to a simpler time. I don't want to be teaching. Everything is hard. Everything is challenging. I just want to give up. I want something easier. Because I forget that when I was back there, it was hard too. And progress is not me giving up and going back to a simpler time. Progress is me putting my trust in God and moving forward. And so that's what I've been feeling these past couple of weeks. But there's another group of you that I need to speak to. And this is the group that they're going to force the issue even if it kills them. When God said, you adults, you're not going to enter the promised land. You're going to stay in the wilderness for 40 years until everyone dies off and a new generation is raised up. There was a group that realized, hold on, we did something wrong. We need to go and possess this land. But Moses warned them, don't go and try to take the land because God is not with you. But they didn't listen again. And they went anyways, and they were defeated easily. Easily. And there are some of you, you just have this personality, this drive that you're like, I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to make this happen. But you forget the one important element in it all. You try to do it by yourself and you forget about God. But you end up beat up and defeated and in a worse situation. But there's a third response. There's a third way. And I want us to turn to the book of Hebrews to take a look at that. We're going to be in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And this is what the author of Hebrews writes. He says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. I want to shift gears a little bit here. And I want us to focus in on the life that God has given us to live. And the writer of Hebrews describes our life as a race. A race that each and every single one of us are running. And it's important to note the kind of race that he is describing. I've been told that there are different kinds of races which require different kinds of approaches. I don't engage in either one of these, but I've been told that sprinting and marathon running are at opposite ends of the athletic spectrum. Would you agree? Right? One lasts a few seconds and the other goes on for hours. And another distinction is that sprinters maximize every muscle movement to improve their speed, whereas marathon runners maximize their movements for endurance. The Christian life, a life following after Jesus, is more of a marathon than a sprint. We need perseverance and endurance to finish our race well. But in our culture, we are obsessed with speed. Come on, if I told you we're going to run a race, one's going to last a few seconds, the other one's going to go on for hours, which one would you choose? Give me the few seconds, right? We want things done quickly. We want to go further, faster. We prefer a short game rather than a long game because we know that it is difficult to develop endurance. It's a challenge to develop endurance. But what ends up happening when we live our life that way, when we live short-sighted, is that we sacrifice our future self for the sake of our current self. We sacrifice. When we're only making decisions for the here and now, we sacrifice our future self just so that we can get what we want to get right now. To fight this tendency, I like what Andy Stanley once said. He said this: prioritize what you value most over what you want now. I believe that's a great definition for discipline. It's choosing what I want most over what I want now at this moment. If you want to finish your race well, the race that God has given you to live, a finish line that is, God willing, far off, then you have to make wise decisions today. Decisions that aren't always easy or appealing. You have to make those hard decisions. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we sabotage ourselves as we are running our race. This is what the writer of Hebrews is talking about. He's telling us, throw off everything that hinders and so easily entangles. He's saying you're running a race. You don't need more weight. You don't need things tying you up, keeping you from running. And many of us take on these things in our lives, and they slow us down. They tie us up. They get us off the path. But life is hard enough on its own. This passage is fascinating. If you do a deep dive in it, it's amazing. The Greek word that the writer uses for race is the word agon, which is where we get our word agony from. So he's saying your life is a race. Your life is an agon. Your life is an agonizing struggle. That's without even taking into consideration the weights and the things that tie us up and keep us from running our race with full steam, full perseverance. And we wonder why we can't develop endurance. And so, because it is much harder to run when you are carrying weights or when you are tied up, I want to briefly cover two things that slow us down, get us stuck, or take us off the path. Okay, just two things. And there could be a litany of things that we can talk about here, but I just want to mention two, right? The writer of Hebrews mentions the sin that so easily entangles. Sin. To sin is to rebel against God. Sin impacts our relationship with Him and our relationship with others. The writer of Hebrews, he's just warning us about the destructive nature of sin. And this is a quote that I've heard before. It's been said, sin will take you further than you want to go. It will keep you longer than you want to stay. And it will cost you more than you want to pay. It's so true. We see it as a temptation. We see it as something that we can enjoy now, but we are forfeiting our future self for what we can get right now. And there are consequences to our sin. Not just natural consequences, which are like the things that entangle us, our relationships, but also disciplinary consequences from God, like what the Israelites experienced. But discipline is so important. And if you read the rest of Hebrews 12, the author writes about how God disciplines us as a loving father. And for those of us who are parents, we know that discipline is important. It's a way that we can correct our kids from a behavior that is not beneficial to them and put them on the path that is best for them. And that's what discipline is meant to do in our lives. It's for our own good, to take us from a path that won't benefit us and to put us on a path where we can thrive and have joy and satisfaction and fulfillment. It's not to squash your fun. Those things are not what's best for you. And some of the greatest stumbling blocks come in the area of sexual sin. This is something that's talked throughout the scriptures. sexual sin. In the book of Proverbs, sexual sin is personified as a woman. And it uses this line to describe how pervasive sexual temptation is. It says in Proverbs 7:12 that at every corner she lurks. She's everywhere. So you need to guard yourself from her. She lurks at every corner. In preparing for this message, I read a quote that said, "Opportunity knocks, but temptation leans on the doorbell." It's not going to go away. Once you untangle one thing, another thing is going to try to trap you up again. So the writer of Hebrews tells us, throw off the sin that so easily entangles. But he also makes a general mention of other hindrances. And for the sake of time, again, I'm only going to mention one that I believe many of us struggle with, including myself. And that's living for or based off of the opinions of others. People who live based off of the opinions of others succumb to the belief that I am what others say that I am. I am whatever you say that I am. Whatever it is that you believe of me, that's what I'm going to believe about myself. Mark Batterson writes in Whisper, "If you live off compliments, you'll probably die by criticisms." And I love this line because it kind of just gets to the point of where are we finding our worth and value from? This is from Robert McGee, who wrote Search for Significance, a fantastic book. He writes this, "Isn't it amazing that we turn to others who have a perspective as limited and darkened as our own to discover our worth?" Where are you receiving your value and your worth? What is it that you are believing about yourself? Are you what others say you are, or are you what God says you are? I found myself struggling with this, and it caught me by surprise. I thought, I don't really care too much about what people think. But I realized that I was adjusting my behavior so that I wouldn't rub people in the wrong way. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I didn't want people to think, not that I wanted all these compliments, I just didn't want people to think negative of me. And God, in a weird way, showed me, you're not free. You're more afraid of what people think of you than you're trusting on what I think of you. You have a fear of man. And so I have written down some affirmations that I want to believe about myself. And these affirmations that I've wrote down probably more than a year ago, these are things that I try to say to myself every day to remind myself of truths that God has spoken over me. And this is what I wrote down in regards to this area. It goes like this: I am enough. Don't worry about who's trying to put stars or dots on me. And that's from a Max Lucado reference. A children's book called You Are Special, where the stars are compliments and the dots are criticisms. Don't worry about who's trying to put stars or dots on me. God's opinion is what matters most. Live my life without constantly wondering what people think about me. And I love this. I can't please everyone at any time, nor can I please anyone all the time. I can't make my wife be happy all the time, and I can't make sure that I can say the right things to please everyone in this room. It's impossible. But I was trying. Very few things will take you farther away from God's plan and purpose for your life than living for or based off of the opinions of others. Guys, can you imagine if Jesus would have allowed Peter's plan for his life to keep him from his ultimate mission? Some of you know this story. Jesus one time was predicting his death and resurrection. He was telling his disciples that he was going to die at the hands of the religious leaders. And Peter, probably just full of confidence, because he just had said that Jesus was the Messiah and that he was Lord. as Jesus is speaking and saying, I'm about to die, Peter decides to rebuke Jesus and says, no, Lord, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. Can you imagine Jesus accepting Peter's plan and saying, Peter, I'm going to do whatever you want me to do. You don't want me to die? That sounds like a pretty good plan, because I benefit in that situation. Aren't you glad that Jesus stuck to his mission? Aren't you glad that Jesus ran his race? That he didn't let the opinion of others sway him or derail him from God's plan and purpose? He didn't let those weights hold him back. So drop living for the approval of others. That's the kind of stuff that hinders us, that gets us stuck and keeps us from running the race that God has for us. All right. So how do we get unstuck? How do we get unstuck? Some of you feel stuck, but you're just in Texas. Like, you need to keep doing more of the same. You know, our kids sometimes, we can be walking or we can be somewhere and they're like, Dad, I don't know what to do. Noble, you're doing it. You're waiting patiently. Noble, you are walking. You are doing exactly what you should be doing. And some of you are trusting God. Some of you are seeking him. Some of you are presenting your request to him. And you're just on that journey. You feel stuck, but you just need to keep doing more of the same. Some of you are stuck, but you just need to take a next step. I recommend you go back and hear the past 2 messages that Ben gave in this series. We all have a next step to take. Some of us, it could mean joining a small group. For some of us, it could mean getting baptized. We feel stuck spiritually. We feel stuck in our lives, but we just need to take a next step. This week, I read a quote that said, direction, not intention, determines our destination. And Ben talked about intention last week. You can have all the intention in the world, but if you don't put a structure to it, if you don't take a next step, those intentions are going to go to waste. Some of us just need to take a next step in the right direction. In the right direction. But I really want to hone in on what the writer of Hebrews tells us to do. He says, fix your eyes on Jesus. Fix your eyes on Jesus. In the beginning of chapter 12, the writer of Hebrews says that therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, and what he's referring to is what has been written in chapter 11. Chapter 11 is known as the chapter of faith. It's kind of like the hall of faith. It's a list of men and women who did great things for God by trusting in him, by keeping their faith in him. And so what the writer of Hebrews is saying, hey, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, not just that they are looking at your life like if you're in an arena running your race. No, look at what they did. They are witnesses that God can use you, that God can break through anything that's holding you back, that you can finish your race well when you keep your eyes fixed on him, when your faith is in him. And guys, what's been the strangest thing for me over these past couple of weeks, I had a 10-day vacation in the midst of this whole ordeal. After I had received that news about my dad, 3 days later, we're hopping on a plane, and it was a great vacation. I kept my disciplines going, right? I was praying, I was reading, but yet I felt like I was getting deeper and deeper stuck into a situation that I couldn't get myself out of, and I didn't know why, because I'm doing all the right things. And what I've come to realize is that what God was asking of me is to give a little bit more. My disciplines weren't, how do I say this? In John chapter 15, he says, if you want to bear fruit, you need to remain in me. You need to remain in me. You can do nothing apart from me. There comes a time when you start to depend more on almost your rhythms than you are on God himself. And what I needed to do, and what I've been trying to do these past couple of days, and I've been feeling more and more refreshed, but at the same time, I'm going back and forth. What I needed to do is to be brutally honest with God and say, God, I can't get out of this without you. I'm feeling helpless. God, I need you to help me. The other night I read that Jesus spent the entire night praying. I was like, man, when was the last time I spent more than 30 minutes praying? I just got into this rhythm, like this is what I do, this is how I pray, this is how I read. But God is saying, no. Do you trust me? Is your hope completely on me? And I have to be honest, I don't feel like it has been. Fix your eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. He will see you through it. He will deliver you. And I don't know what that means for you, but what I'm saying is search for him, hunger for him, cry out to him, and he will hear you, and he will get you unstuck and into your promised land, to your destination. That's my prayer. That's my hope. Let me pray for us. God, I thank you for who you are, for your great love and for your great mercy. God, thank you for the life that you've called us to live, the race that you want us to run. God, there's people in this room going through many different things. There's some in here that feel stuck. God, I pray that you will help us get out of the situation that we're in and continue to help us make forward progress, to chase after you, to get us to our final destination where you want us to be. I pray that you will help us. And I pray that that will come about as we seek you, as we look to you, as we go above and beyond the things that we have come to rely and trust in. God, we know that you can deliver us. We are all on a journey, and we need to take next steps towards you. Help us do so. In Christ's name we pray. Amen and amen. I'm going to ask you to stand. At this time, we're going to celebrate communion. And the band's going to lead us in a song, Amazing Grace. And so as we are celebrating communion, as we take the bread, which represents Christ's body, and we dip it into the juice, which represents his blood, let us be reminded of that sweet grace that Jesus has poured out upon us. We are living in the new covenant. Unlike what the Israelites had when they were walking through the wilderness, we have a new covenant, one of grace, one of love, one of mercy. And so that's what we have come at this moment to celebrate. Let us respond as the band leads us.